My name is Kevin. When I was a kid, my mother passed away, leaving just my father and me. Dad worked in construction, so he left early in the morning and returned late at night. Back in elementary school, I couldn't afford the popular games or comics that other kids had. This led to being frequently teased for being po, even in high school. I often wondered why we were so po or why I didn't have a mother like everyone else, sometimes crying about it. But I knew how hard my father worked, clumsily learning household chores and raising me with everything he had. After my mother's departure, he always tried his best not to make me feel lonely. On days off, he'd always take me out. On birthdays, he'd buy me games I wanted but could never ask for, or bake me a cake, even if it looked a little funny. Seeing the way my father lived, I started dreaming of becoming a respectable man like him someday.
What are your plans for your future?
My dad once asked. I'm currently a junior in high school. I replied, I'm thinking of working after high school, Dad. He was taken aback, worrying if he had pushed me too hard. He insisted, I've saved enough for you to go to college, son. I know I can still study without heading to college and I learn better through real-life experiences. I responded. At first, my dad was lost for words but eventually respected my decision. Job hunting was tough. While working part-time, I tirelessly looked for a full-time job. I took some certification courses and finally managed an interview at a small local company. The interviewer wasn't impressed with my high school diploma, but the boss seemed to like me, and I got the job. At first, I handled simple tasks and paperwork, but thanks to my diligence, I started gaining recognition from my colleagues. However, some became jealous.
What's this high school grad thinking, working so hard? He's probably trying to suck up to the boss.
It was often frustrating. I wanted to respond, but nothing could change my educational background. I was disheartened, but there were a few who genuinely appreciated me, so I kept pushing through. It was tough, though. That was around the time. Then there was this supervisor, Mr. Anderson. He'd mock my background, saying things like,
"You're just a high school grad, huh? Impressive you've lasted this long."
Or, "I'm surprised a high school grad like you can even get certified. Kudos to you." With a sarcastic laugh. He didn't use direct insults, but he often mentioned my lack of education. I felt stressed with every such encounter but kept reminding myself to prove my worth through my work. Besides Mr. Anderson, there were others who'd ridicule me out of pure jealousy. But every time they did, Anderson would show up saying, "This high school grad won't ever match up to you guys. Forget him, let's grab some lunch." And he'd lead the others away. It was tough to fit in with the rest, but around that time, I met Catherine, who later became my wife. She was technically my senior at work, but we clicked instantly. She was a cheerful woman who, despite sometimes having a sharp tongue, was always a great listener. She'd often invite me out for drinks or treat me to some burgers after work. Being around Catherine made all my worries seem trivial, and before I knew it, we were laughing things off together. She had that kind of energy. When I talked to her about Anderson's teasing, she said, "What's his problem? As long as you do your job, your background doesn't matter. Anderson's the real fool. You'll prove him wrong someday." She'd slap my back and cheer me on. Catherine's presence was a huge comfort to me. And as time went on, I found myself drawn to Catherine more than just a colleague. It was my first love. We started meeting outside of work, and before long, we were spending our days off together. By the time I reached my 5th year at the company, I confessed my feelings to Catherine. Catherine, I really like you. I know I'm younger and might seem unreliable, but would you consider dating me?
Your face is so red. Sure, let's date.
And with a shy smile, Catherine agreed. After we started dating, it would not be an exaggeration to say that those were the happiest times Kevin had ever experienced in his life. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed to Catherine. After giggling, she made a big circle with her hand. I was so happy I could have cried. When we went to visit our parents' homes, my dad tearfully said to Catherine, "I have such a wonderful son. Please make him happy." And for some reason, he was bowing deeply to her. Catherine patted my dad on the back and said with a big grin, "Leave it to me," which made me wonder if she was the one joining my family. When we submitted our marriage license, we held hands and walked home, laughing and saying, "From today, we're not just senior and junior, or lovers, but husband and wife." We decided to have a wedding ceremony. We wanted to thank and make happy all the people who had helped us, Catherine's parents, and especially my dad. At the wedding, we invited our families, the CEO, a few colleagues, and also Anderson. To be honest, I didn't really want to invite Anderson, but Catherine insisted. We should send Anderson an invitation too, she said firmly. To be honest, I was a bit perplexed, but since Catherine was so insistent, we decided to invite Anderson to our wedding. Then came the wedding day. The ceremony was progressing smoothly. My emotional dad was bawling, and even the CEO had tears in his eyes. The colleagues who used to make fun of me didn't seem too pleased to be there. Given that it was a joyous occasion and both the CEO and my father were present, I thought there wouldn't be any disruptions. But then I overheard them. They were gathered together, whispering.
I heard he only has a high school diploma. Nice ceremony, though.
Clearly, they were mocking me. Even on such a day, they have to gossip. I was taken aback. From a distance, I saw Anderson approach Catherine. I panicked. If they ridiculed Catherine as well, I wouldn't be able to stand it. Just as I was about to rush over, fist clenched, I heard,
Thank you, Anderson.
Catherine's voice rang out from the microphone. Everyone in the hall turned to look at Catherine and Anderson. After a brief silence, Catherine faced the crowd.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to share a story about Kevin and myself, if that's all right.
She continued. I was taken aback. This wasn't in the wedding program. The hall went quiet.
Kevin joined our company a few years ago. He's been diligent and sincere, which I believe is why I fell for him. But there were colleagues who didn't think well of Kevin. I'm talking about you people. You often ridiculed him with the word high school graduate, didn't you?
Catherine pointed to the colleagues who had been whispering earlier. A murmur spread through the crowd. Trying to deflect the attention, those colleagues laughed nervously and said, "No, you got it wrong." Catherine continued.
People who judge others by their educational background are narrow-minded. Ironically, Kevin is now more valuable to the company than you are. But despite all the insults and slander, Kevin has endured and worked hard up to this point.
She then turned to Anderson.
We might not have made it this far without the support of some people. Anderson, thanks to you, we are able to celebrate this day.
This was a shocker. Everyone knew Anderson was the biggest critic of Kevin. As murmurs filled the room, Catherine continued.
I know some of you may be surprised, but it's all true. Anderson always teased Kevin, my husband. On the surface, he ridiculed him as a high school graduate, just like those employees over there. But, Anderson, I happened to eavesdrop. You mocked my husband on purpose to prevent others from getting too heated and gossiping about the other employees, didn't you?
Anderson's eyes went wide with surprise. Even Kevin couldn't help but exclaim, "What?"
It was by chance. I intended to give Anderson a piece of my mind, but I overheard him talking with other employees. Anderson, you said it, didn't you? He might have only graduated from high school, but he's got potential. He's too good to go to waste in a place like this.
It should have been easy to call out the gossiping employees, but doing so would probably only increase the number of harsh words and harassments directed at me. It turned out that Anderson had deliberately acted in a way that mocked me the most to divert the attention. I was misunderstood by everyone, but Anderson willingly took that role.
So, Anderson, I want to express my gratitude. Without you, we wouldn't have come this far. Thank you for awkwardly standing up for my husband.
Catherine said, tears forming in her eyes and a smile on her face. I couldn't hold back my tears. I had been unaware of Anderson's, my former boss's, clumsy affection. I rushed over to Catherine and Anderson. Catherine handed me the microphone. Our eyes met, and she seemed to say, "You have something to say, don't you?" With tears streaming down my face, I mustered up the strength to say, "Anderson, thank you so much." That was all I could manage. To be honest, I hadn't even processed my emotions yet, but in a split second, Catherine proved that he wasn't the bad guy. From somewhere in the room, perhaps my father, applause began to fill the venue. Anderson looked a bit uncomfortable, but he also looked pleased. Before I knew it, the gossiping employees had swiftly exited the venue. I was sobbing, repeating Anderson, Anderson, when he told me, "Hey, today's your big day. Get on with the ceremony," with a bemused smile. The ceremony proceeded smoothly after that commotion and soon concluded. And at work, there were no more employees mocking me as the high school grad. Whether they learned their lesson from Catherine's words or genuinely reflected on their behavior was unclear. A few years later, laughter echoed from an apartment.
Hey, Kevin, how the heck do you hold a baby?
Anderson's panicked voice, Catherine and my father's laughter, and then there was me. Ever since that wedding day misunderstanding was cleared up, I had wanted to express my gratitude to Anderson, so Catherine and I often invited him for dinner and got closer.
You really are something. After all the times I mocked you.
Anderson remarked with a wry smile, to which I responded, "I wouldn't be where I am today without you, Anderson. Be proud of that." Meanwhile, Catherine was laughing hysterically on the side. A few years after that wedding, Catherine and I had a child. Today, Anderson and my father were visiting our home. Even after the wedding, my father had repeatedly thanked Anderson, and before we knew it, our families had become close. Anderson, want to try feeding the baby some milk? We'll help. Catherine and I offered. Anderson held our baby carefully and said,
Really? You better help.
His face was panicked but pleased. It was almost unthinkable to see such a change in my old boss, Anderson, which made me chuckle.